It looks like we have a we have the crowd has spoken. We have a vote. We go for English, and it's really not a problem at all. This is just because it's the Danish chapter who is hosting this event, and initially we wanted to do it in Danish. And Morten Andersen is my favorite American football kicker as well. So we will do English. Perfect. Okay, let's get started, Mette. So everyone, a very warm welcome. And I have my speaking notes in Danish, but I'll try and shift it to English. But a warm welcome to everyone. We have 45 minutes and the topic is voluntourism, which is a really important issue and a topic that I personally are looking very much forward to learn a lot about. And luckily we have Mette Moegreen with us today, who has a lot of knowledge around voluntourism, and you will get the opportunity, Mette, to introduce yourself just in a short minute. Because before we kick off to the topic of the day, I just wanted to say a few words about an introduction to Impact Travel Alliance. So Impact Travel Alliance was started in United States in 2015 and is now a global community, a non-profit organization. And we have the aim of improving the world through how we travel. Today we have more than 30 local chapters around the world, and we have hosted more than 400 events since we started in 2015. Here in Denmark, we have 4 chapter leads who is volunteering, which is actually very interesting for today's topic as well. But we are volunteering with Impact Travel Alliance to really educate and inspire travelers in Denmark for more sustainable travel, and actually also putting sustainable travel into a Danish context. So we are all from the travel industry, all of us. We work on in our day-to-day jobs is in the travel industry in various places. And this is our first live event from ITA Denmark, so we're really excited about being here, and thank you so much for joining us. So really, the next thing I have to do is give you the word to Mette, but before I do that, I just wanted to say that everyone is muted on the call, so if you want to send a question to Mette, and please feel free to do so, please use the chat, and I'll make sure to bring it forward. So I'll just hand it over to you, Mette, and I believe we need to change who is sharing screen, so I will just stop sharing mine. There we go.
Take over.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just get up to speed. Yeah. So all the headlinings here will be in Danish, but I'll translate as we get on with it. So briefly, just an introduction about me. I have a master's in international tourism, and I did my thesis on volunteering. I've worked in the travel industry for several years, and I've worked abroad, I've lived abroad, I've studied abroad, so I'm quite an avid traveler in general. This is a topic that's really near to me because I used to sell volunteer volunteer products to young travelers, and also because I've been doing a lot of deep diving into this area, which is very complex and very interesting when you start looking at it from a different glance through an eye of a researcher. So I hope you'll gain some new insights today. I'll get into an introduction about what voluntourism is, basically, a bit about who the volunteers are, what the industry is today. I'll talk to you about some of the pitfalls and the adverse effects that are seen in the market right now with volunteerism, and then I have some examples of some positive projects that have a really well impact and who manage their projects in a very sustainable way. One of them is a Danish project, but the two other ones are international. So volunteering isn't a new concept. It started with the Peace Corps, where we, in the mid-50s, it really started to take a more organized form. And from there on, it developed into sustainable tourism and was for quite a while a niche in the tourism industry. After a while, it got picked up by backpackers who were traveling around the world. They met local people, they saw these projects, and they started volunteering as well. So where we are today is that voluntourism has moved on to the mass market in the tourism industry. We have a lot of people volunteering. We have a lot of organizations today, a lot of projects all over the world, and more or less, I would say, half of the people that I sold backpacker tours to when I was working with the B2C in the travel industry wanted to do some form of volunteering or do some kind of project where they could engage with local people. So the type of projects we see in this market for voluntourism is supply and demand projects, where the supply side are volunteers and projects that aid the tourism industry, for instance, with different events, different festivals where you can sign up as a volunteer. It can also be helping at a UNESCO heritage site, and you have the demand side, which is projects that are mainly made for staying 1 to 4 weeks, predominantly working with humans, often kids, and animals. And the volunteers we see are mainly Western volunteers. They're well sorted in terms of economy. They don't have responsibilities as a steady job, being a parent, having a mortgage, stuff like that. They're mainly young females who have a gap year and want to combine traveling with a form of volunteering where they aid a local community. What they want to gain from this is, of course, to help local people. They also want to do this because they want to gain some local insight, some cultural insight. They want to grow as a person, and often they also want to do this because they can use it proactively on their resume, which is okay as long as you can gain from this. That's completely fine, as long as you do it in a good manner. So the industry today has, because it's moved into the mass market very rapidly within the last decade, it's become very complex, and some would say it's a $2 billion industry. Some would say it's way more. And that's because of the actors in this industry right now are not regulated, and it's hard to define who is a part of it. So some would say that travel agencies are a part of this tourism industry, this voluntourism industry. Some would say that travel agents aren't. Some would say that a company like Project Abroad, for an international example, I think they are international, are part of this industry. Some would say they're not. So right now the boundaries of this industry are not clearly defined. And that is also why some argue that this is still a part of sustainable tourism, where you aid locally, do conservation, you help educating, you help communities, for instance, when you have a crisis like in Greece with the immigrants coming, staying there in camps. Some would say that it is helping. Others is saying that what research is showing now is that voluntourism, in the sense that it's moving right now, is a new form of colonization of mainly poor countries, underdeveloped countries. The reason why they say that is because there are a lot of actors, a lot of organizations that are establishing projects in these countries without being at the local community without engaging with the local community enough to know what is actually needed. But they keep the project going to send volunteers that end up taking jobs from local people and who also come with a Western mind. And it's hard to come to a project growing up, for instance, in Denmark, and then put aside everything you've learned about culture, what is right, what is wrong, how should you teach people, how should you take care of a child, and so on. You can't put those things away from your person. So you come in and you start implementing Western ways and Western cultures. So it's still an ongoing debate, and I would say it's not either or. You have really good, very well organized projects that are helping, and you have the other as well. So what I'm hoping that you guys gain today is more insight in how can we navigate through this. So there are expectations when you do volunteering, and there are reality. Sadly, what we see today is that there's a narrative when it comes to commercialization of this, where volunteering has become very simple and romanticized, in the sense that a lot of agencies, both volunteer project agencies that only do volunteering, and also travel agencies selling volunteering, they say you will help just by being there. You will help because you are proactive, because you want to help, because you'll put time and effort and love into this, you'll make a difference. That is not really the case. And what happens is, from the research that I did with the volunteers that I spoke to, and also what a lot of other researchers that are studying volunteers are seeing, is that the expectations for volunteering are too high for what you can accomplish from a stay where you're there from 1 to 4 weeks, which people generally are. And that means that people will come back from this experience and be disappointed, and they'll often blame the project and not the organization sending them, but the local project and the local people organizing it. And what we see that people are complaining about is the way the locals are undertaking work tasks, and the way the tasks are communicated. So if you have a daily week and you're wondering, what should I do this week? People feel that nobody is telling them exactly what to do and how to do it. So they feel confused, and they feel like they're not really contributing. A lot of people are also complaining because and this is true, because they don't have Wi-Fi, because they don't have running water, and so on. So there are clearly some form of mismatch in what is being sold to people and what reality is. And what I want to let you guys know is that this is a project. It's something that people have a profit from. If a travel agency sells voluntourism, if they send you out on a project, they're not doing it if they don't gain anything from it in terms of money. It's the same with the organizations that send you to projects all over the world. If they didn't make any money from this, they wouldn't be doing it. That is completely fine. It's completely fine that they're making money from this. But what you need to be aware of is how much money are they making and how much money is going to the project. So research says that in general, people spend an average of $2,000 for a project. When it's a project going from around 1 to 4 weeks, sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more. And from that amount of money, around 1,000 completely goes to the travel agency or the organization behind the project. And then you have the administration and so on, the marketing, and what ends up going completely to the project is in general around $250. So you really need to be aware of the fact that the money that you're paying are not solely going to the project. And it's not solely going to accommodation and food and so on. So the thing when you pay for work also is you're paying to contribute at this volunteer project. And what happens in our mind when we pay for something is we expect to get something back, which is completely natural. But the thing is that here you can't really expect that because you pay a certain amount of money, you get a certain form of output. It depends on how you approach it, how you do the research beforehand, and how you act on the project. What we see when people come back is that a lot of people, they have a form of idea of what was good, what was bad, when they come back, like, immediately after they come back. And then as years goes on, suddenly some people realize that actually they didn't help at this project at all. And maybe they were contributing to something negative. And that's because maybe they weren't matched right with the project. Maybe they weren't mature enough. Maybe they were not there for the right reasons. And there is a responsibility that you have before doing volunteerism. You have to figure out, why am I doing this exactly? What can I contribute with? Do we have any form of skills that could be used on this certain project? And you also have to figure out how is the project exactly organized. So once you approach this, approach is like you were investigating a new job, like you were going to a job interview. Ask, what is the long-term strategies? What is the latest report on how this project is doing? How are you engaged? How is the company engaged with this community? Is it run by locals? Are the goals set by the locals? And so on. So there's a lot of questions that you need to ask, because people rarely, they don't tell up front if you don't ask. So keep that in mind, and keep in mind that everybody, like when you travel and you're not volunteering, you always meet a cultural clash in a sense. They're more intense often when you do voluntourism, and that's because you're so closely related to local people often. And what we see is often with childcare. We have a way of bringing up children in the West that is completely different from what they do in a third world country like Malawi or another country, Ecuador, and so on. So we have to have that in mind when we're doing this project, and we have to have in mind that maybe communication will be a barrier as well. A classic example that has been shown across several research examples with volunteers are from orphanage or hospitals working with kids, where the Western volunteers are saying, these people working here are not taking care of the kids. They're not picking them up. They're not giving them love. They're not changing their diapers. And when researchers are asking the locals working there, they're saying, well, these people are paying to be here, so we assume they want to do this, and it seems like they're happy about changing diapers because they're doing it all the time, so we don't want to take that away from them. So mismatches like this happens a lot in volunteerism, and you have to be aware of that, because you're there for such a short time that you won't really gain the form of cultural insight that you're actually hoping to get, because you're there short term. So set the expectations right on what you're actually gaining, and figure out if you're really doing this because you want to get a deep insight to another culture. Find a project where you can stay for more than a month. Commit long term if you really want to gain some insight, and if you really want to see that you're contributing and want to see the effects, you have to give more than 4 weeks in general. And I would also say projects saying that you can work with kids for less than a month, that is not okay for the kids. So stay away from projects like that as well. Sadly, it was shown in a research from 2018 that around 85% of the orphanages that do volunteer projects in Nepal the kids there actually have 1 or 2 living parents still. But because there are money involved in this whole industry, they get interdependent on, in the way that a poor community would like volunteers to come in because they spend money on the project, but they also spend money in their free time. So money-wise, it's good for them. Short term, they think this is good. Then they become dependent on this form of tourism, and they will actually push for local parents that are in need of money to send their kids to an orphanage to make sure that there's still, you know, a constant flow of kids here, which is really sad. So be aware of this when you're working in a school, when you're working with young people that are often vulnerable. If you don't have any form of education or background around childcare, I would advise that you work on a different project, because all the research that are done on projects like this are showing that it has severe adverse effects on the kids, even though you want to do it because you have a good heart and a desire to help. So again,
maybe,
finding the right project. Yeah.
No, maybe it's just, I think this was the right time to ask the question, because there's actually a question in the chat for you from Esther Smith, because you're mentioning this, what are the right reasons for doing this? So if you can actually, if you can say that there's a right reason, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on what do you think is the right reasons for doing volunteerism or volunteer work?
So the right reasons, of course, it's subjective, but from my point of view and from what I've seen with research, you should do this, of course, because you have a desire to help, and because you want to grow as a person, and because you have a desire to know about a specific culture. So if you know you're interested in a specific culture in a specific country, it makes sense. And if you can see that there's something where I'm really good at this, I could really contribute because I have a skill set around a certain area. I know something about conservation, or I know something about animals. I know something about childcare. I know something about family development. Then it's really good that you want to volunteer. I would rather turn it around and say, if you're volunteering with the main reason for boosting your resume, and because you want to have a great experience, an interesting and unique, authentic, different experience, if that are the only parameters saying, I want to do volunteering because you want to have a great experience, then maybe you should do an adventure trip instead. There's a lot of ways that you can engage with local communities. There's a lot of other projects you can do. Then you could do instead the supply side of volunteering, where you'll help at heritage sites, where you help on festivals. One of the projects that I'm coming into later on, you can easily do that, where you engage with local people without it having an adverse effects. So you can always do volunteering, even though you only have a short time, and even though it's because you need a certain thing on your resume, or you have just a desire to experience something that is completely different on your next travel, then just stay away from the projects that research shows have a negative impact on volunteerism because it's short-term stays. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think, I mean, as you say, it's a subjective, I mean, the right reason is subjective depending on what is, I mean, if you really do have skills in a certain area where that is needed in a certain country or whatever, it's, that is a subjective, that it's the right reason then. But I guess the right reason could also, I mean, be that you, I mean, that you are searching to do good, but you don't necessarily have a skill. But then again, you would then have to look for, how can I do this in a different way than maybe, I mean, taking up work that I'm not trained to do. So that could be, if you are in an orphanage, then maybe you are the one who's sweeping the floors and taking out the garbage, and not necessarily working with the kids. So in that sense, maybe, I don't know if that's...
And in terms of short-term stays, I mean, what I think is amazing projects are most of the conservation projects that are popping up around the world. you can volunteer for 1 or 2 weeks just cleaning up on beaches, in forests, in cities, and so on. And that is really helpful. And that is the kind of job that nobody really wants to undertake locally often. And you can also do the form. Some have projects where they combine conservation with educating about conservation. If you really want to be engaged in, with a local community, where it would often be more adult people that you educate. So in that sense, I would say that you're better off. It's just what we see often is that with the short-term stays, it is often the most popular ones are often with kids. But the thing is, you need to put it, turn it around. I don't know where people are from, but for me, thinking that somebody would come from the States to Denmark to be there for 2 weeks in my son's kindergarten, just to have an experience and to kind of approach it in a way where I have something to teach your kid and something to teach it, the people working there. For me, that just seems completely off and completely wrong. So always try and reverse it and say, would this seem wrong for me in my own country if this was a volunteering project? So if you turn it around and think it's wrong, go find something else to do. Find a different project. If you think it would benefit to clean the beaches in your own country, probably would benefit to clean the beaches in Thailand as well. And also be aware again with what I said before, that you cannot remove your mindset. You cannot remove, everything you're brought up with in terms of culture and the way you approach people and what you think is the right and wrong thing to do. So that is also the reason why when it comes to kids that are very prone to be, affected by, these people that come in and take care of them, it's better that they're being brought up by local people that know their customs, their culture, and so on. And there's also some really great projects where instead of, helping the kids, you help women gaining a job, so they get an income, so they can better take care of their own family and develop. So there are a lot of great projects still that you can join without having these issues. So what you just need to be aware again is when you find these projects online, which is often what you do, if you see this very simplified commercialization about voluntourism, where the headlines are and this is true, this is what some pages say, find your inner Angelina Jolie, or saying just a headline saying make a difference, and they only have kids like what you see on the screen, only have pictures like you see on the screen right now. Maybe they don't have the right knowledge right now then about how to sell voluntourism. So I would stay away from that. But if you see things like, for instance, Human Crew, I think that's an international organization as well. They're quite selective about their volunteers. They get 2,000 people a year applying to be a volunteer on their projects. They only select 400 people. And they say that they know that they don't gain, they could gain way more money for their projects if they took in everybody, but they don't want to take in people that don't have a right skill set. And even though you have a right skill set, you have to undertake education. And if you fail that education, even though you paid for it, you still don't go to a project. So organizations like that, where they say, this is not something where you just can come and gain from it, we really need to see the return as well, a good sign. When they say that this is something where you're both contributing and not saying that you gain, you're starting to find the right projects. So look at the narratives that they're telling you in the way that they're selling the projects online.
So this is maybe answering the question, one of the questions that's also on the chat from Wafa, asking, do you know if there's any pre-trip training available? But I guess this organization that you're talking about, they are actually doing pre-trip trainings. Yeah.
And a lot of organizations are, which is amazing. Most of them do it in the sense that it might be on location. So you're actually traveling to the country and you have the education there. And then from there on, you go on to the project. So they'll have like a base first where you have education, and some do it, especially now, where it's a form of online training beforehand.
Okay.
Yeah.
The same guys, the same person's asking another question. Do you know if there's any global bodies that are certifying voluntourism organizers? So if there's any official certification of voluntourism organizers, if that exists?
Not to my knowledge right now, and I think you might find some locally. I think the reason is that the whole industry around this are still kind of figuring out where they are, and they're, constantly getting more knowledge about this themselves. So until, the whole, I would say, ecosystem, the whole
ecosystem.
ecosystem, yeah, okay. Until the whole ecosystem around this industry are more defined, I don't think there's a universal label that
Certification. Okay.
certification you can get.
But now you're saying, actually, you're mentioning the word industry several times. I mean, I know that you have a few numbers on how big is this industry actually?
It is quite big. So in general, again, I think I briefly approached it before. Some are saying this is an industry that make around $2 billion a year. Some are saying it's more than $100 billion a year, which is quite extreme. But again, I mean, the amount of backpackers that we have, the amount of people in the Western world doing a gap year experience, if just half of them are doing volunteering, it's massive numbers. And it's interesting to see what is happening now after COVID, because there's going to be a lot of projects that couldn't take in volunteers. So I'm quite interested in seeing how did they cope without this constant flow of Western people coming in short term. Are they doing fine? Are they doing better? Or are they doing worse? That is going to be very interesting to see, actually, because that's also where we're starting to see if are we actually doing anything good? Are we having an impact? And I would say that there are probably some projects right now that are hurting, that are looking forward to getting more work, more hands, more knowledge, and there's probably some where it doesn't really make a difference because they have enough money to make it through a year or two. So that's actually an extra interesting fact in terms of the situation right now.
So there's another question which I think maybe also leads to the next slide that you have, but it's from Chantal asking, how do you check the destination agency hosting the volunteer? And do you think volunteers should know who they are before you leave for the destination?
Oh, that was a long one.
So how do you check the destination agency hosting the volunteer?
Yeah.
And do you think that the volunteers should know that before they actually leave for the destination?
That they should know who they are?
Not who they are, but who the agency hosting them is.
Okay. Yeah. They should know. Yeah, they should know. If you don't know, I mean, this is all about transparency. If you find a good agency, a good project, they'll be completely transparent with you on things like that. So you should know beforehand. If you're in doubt, if you're talking to an agency in your country and you're not really sure about, they might tell you one thing about the project because they want to sell it, because they get commission. But the fact about the project might be different. You can always, look up the project online and see how do they have their own site? Do they have some form of report? Do they have some goals? Do they have a landing page themselves where people can sign up directly as volunteers? Because then maybe that will be better than doing it through an agency. So yeah, you should definitely know. Did that answer it? Because again, it was a very
Yes,
long
I think
question.
so.
Yeah.
And Chantal agrees that transparency is very important, and I think we can
Yeah.
all agree on that in most things, right?
Yeah, in most things,
Yeah,
and especially
yeah,
here because you have so many links that are
yeah,
independent.
yeah,
So
yeah.
as long as and sending organization is transparent and open, and as long as they vet you as well as you're there, like a job interview, you know you're on the right track with the project.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect. Thank you.
So as I said, there are a lot of great projects out there. I've just taken a few examples. The first one, I've done that quite a lot myself, and I think it speaks very well with the ITA as well. It's Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. So what you do is you just go online and you sign up for this, and it's a small amount you pay to get all these contacts for organic farms that are literally all over the world. So you help these local farmers, and it can be everything from a small family that has a small farm up to bigger farms that sell products to local restaurants and so on. You can stay there from most of the time 1 week up till 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, depending on the farm and the season. And what I really like about this is that you don't pay for staying there. You get free accommodation, you get free meals, and you have to work between 6 and 8 hours a day at the farm with what they need from you. It gives you a very close and very unique insight in not just farming, but in how the local community is. And you actually become part of the family for a while, like if you're having a homestay experience. You have supper with them, they take you out for barbecues with their friends. So you really get to have a close insight into the culture and learn from that culture in a different way than if you were in a bigger project where you would spend, let's say, 60% of the time with other Western volunteers. So that is really nice. I've done it where I was the only volunteer at the farm. I've also done it where we were 5 to 6 volunteers at the farm. So it's very nice. It's very flexible, and you can just do it, as you go. If you're traveling for 6 months, you can just do it on and off for those 6 months as you travel along. It's all sustainable farms. So that is really nice as well. And they are actually certified organic farms. So again, Worldwide Opportunities, I think it started around the 70s. So it's also a very organized and very known organization. So definitely a good recommendation from here. Again, when you go onto their website, what you will see is, again, the narrative that they're telling. The text that they have on there is, again, it's not about what you gain, it's what you guys can contribute with together. So it's not the focus on you, it's a focus on how you guys can gain something from each other. I don't know if was that a question that came there?
No, the thing is, I always wonder if these organic farms are just being cheap. Are you getting free labor when they could be paying someone local to do the work?
It's an interesting question. You could say the same about all the volunteering projects that are set up around the world. Here, often they are small local farms that need seasonal help. So most farms won't say that you can come and work for the whole year, depending on where they stay. It'll often be seasonal work. That's one thing. Another thing is that if you flip it around, if you are a teacher at a volunteer project, don't you think that there's a teacher at the local community that is educated and are not getting a job because you can offer free work? So that that'll always be the case, and it's a very good question, because it is a very important factor in general with volunteerism. And that is also why when you take these jobs, when you look into these projects, figure out what is it you can contribute with, and are you taking a job from somebody else in the local community? Often these are short-term jobs at the farms. Again, it's seasonally. Yeah. the farms that I stayed on, I can't speak for all of them. They had local staff working there all year round as well. Yep. Did that answer the question? Yeah.
I think so, yeah. And Rachel is saying absolutely they should probably hire a teacher. So it's really, I think it's really important to have this balance of when are you taking a job out of someone local's hands, and when are you actually contributing to the community. It's a very thin, I think, a fine balance there.
Yeah. And that is also why a lot of the conservation projects today, what we can see is that right now the local communities in some areas around, areas in Thailand where you have a lot of pollution from tourists, of course the local people are, annoyed by this, but they are not, they don't have the setup in their region to have, a public form of task force to clean this up, or so to speak, as we might have here in Western countries. They don't have the money, they don't have the manpower to clean up in the same sense that we do. So that is why, for instance, cleaning up is brilliant, because you're not really taking a job from somebody else at the moment.
That's right. Mette, we are running out of time.
Oh, okay.
So just it's really interesting topic here, and time flies when it is interesting. So maybe just the last remarks for you before we round off the meeting.
Last remarks. Okay, yeah, because there's so much more to say. Well, I think the main thing is here that to take away from today is that vet the organizations very well, and really assess why you're, reflect upon the fact, like, why am I doing this? And don't hesitate to ask a lot of questions, because if you're paying for something, if you went down and bought a new phone, you would have a ton of questions to make sure it's the right thing. Have more questions here. I mean, again, this is a product, you're paying for it. It's an experience you're paying for. So make sure that you're not being blindsided by anything. Because that are one of the main issues we're seeing right now, is because there are so many links and everything is so independent in the industry. We have a major lack of transparency between the volunteers and the projects.
Thank you so much for those wise words. And I absolutely agree with the last comment, saying I would love to attend another session on this, because there's so much to learn and consider. And I think, just from the engagement here and everything that you mentioned, I also have a lot of questions I still want to ask, but we are running out of time. So thank you so much, Mette, for this insightful session, and for sharing your knowledge and your findings in your research. Thank you so much. So if I would just take back the screen for a very short message, really. Let me see. Here we go. I just why is it not? Is it share? It's my screen now, right? Yeah. Exactly, here we go. Because I just want to take this opportunity to also advertise a little bit for upcoming events in Impact Travel Alliance. On the 19th of May, we have an event about airline emissions and their impact on the climate change. And you can sign up for this on Eventbrite as well, but you can also watch out on the webpage, impacttravelalliance.org/events. So if you want to attend there. And then just a few words from Impact Travel Denmark, saying that if you are interested in joining our chapter, we are always looking for new volunteers to spread the word around sustainable travel. And maybe we will have the opportunity to come back to you, Mette, one day and talk even more about voluntourism. Yeah. So from us here, thank you very much for participating. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you all. And thank you again, Mette, for everything and for your time.